What's going on with LinkedIn is changing and becoming more like Instagram and TikTok, huh? Tell us about this.
Yeah, I want to bring you all the latest and greatest things that are happening. And LinkedIn decided to start acting more like TikTok and Instagram. And so they're now rolling it out, and people will be able to navigate videos on LinkedIn very similar to the way they do TikTok and Instagram. And unfortunately, for some of us, it makes it more like those two platforms, even though we like LinkedIn as itself and not those other platforms.
Yeah. Corey, to that point, with X and Instagram and TikTok and all that, you can state your mind. It doesn't matter what you want to talk about. You can put your flag in the sand and say, this is how I feel. LinkedIn seems to have always been that we're just going to keep it business, contacts, people you can interact with, maybe people that you can, make some money with down the road. But I'm starting to see the political mindset of a lot of the people that I follow or I see on LinkedIn is starting to bleed into that as well. You see it the same way?
I have a phrase that I use for LinkedIn for people. It's be yourself at work.
Oh, that's awesome.
Key difference there.
Huge.
Yeah, so I am seeing what you're seeing. I don't like it either, but I will tell your listeners and your viewers that it is important to be yourself and that we engage more the more we see of you, human photos, real authentic stuff, but leave the political stuff, the vacation photos, leave that for Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
Actually, that segues into one of my questions for you. Is I think we've talked about this with you before, but it's an important topic, which is this buzzword of authentic, and you just touched upon it. Because it's interesting for a brand, how do they be authentic without maybe being polarizing? Or is that okay? Sometimes Nike certainly has taken lots of stands in how they are, and people love Nike, and the people are going to buy Nike regardless of that or not, but it doesn't really affect their bottom line. But for a smaller business, what does that look like, being authentic, and how can business owners, small business owners, take that and leverage that on social media?
Let me give you a quick example. It's usually the best way I can describe it. And this is a dentist office out in California near you guys, a bunch of dentists. And what they do is the first thing they do to be authentic is to show the dentist's personal side. Oftentimes we see them just in the chair. They got the mask on, they're super whatever, but we get to see a little fun side. So they'll play some games, like they'll point to whomever's the one who comes in latest or never pays for lunch, but have some fun with the dentist, which is cool. Seeing some of the behind the scenes, that kind of thing. That's a way to be authentic and not have to take a stance or do anything that you're uncomfortable with. It's just showing a little bit more of what's going on in the office and behind the scenes.
Corey Perlman is the owner of Impact Social Media Incorporated. You can check him out, CoreyPerlman.com and ImpactSocialMedia.com as well. Corey, if I'm about to launch my widgets company, and obviously social media has to be a major component of success for me as far as marketing and advertising what I'm doing, is there a golden rule, or is there the first hurdle, the first step that is all important in doing so?
Yes, fish where the fish are. And what I simply mean by that is figure out who your customers and prospects are before ever planting your flag on a social media site. Because if your customer is 40 and above, then TikTok is about as far away from your strategic plan as possible.
We were talking about that, I feel like, before with you, is that a lot of people think that they need to be on TikTok because that's where it is. But a lot of the TikTok base is going to be the younger crowd, stereotypically speaking, and they're not necessarily buying. They're doing the dances and they're laughing and they're sharing, but they're not necessarily buying the product, depending on what it is. So that is one thing people need to look at, like what you were saying. Where is your demographic, where's your audience, and where are your purchasers?
And the problem is, yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but if you prioritize TikTok, then you're taking resources and time away from a platform like LinkedIn. That might be your golden ticket. So what I always tell people is to prioritize two platforms based upon who your audience is. And oftentimes those are LinkedIn and Instagram, something to that effect, or maybe it's TikTok and Pinterest, depending upon who your demographic is.
Corey, do you have a lot of people, a lot of big name companies that are contacting you and having you and your team basically steer their social media ship?
Yes, we have a lot of companies that ask us for strategic advice and direction and things of that nature, and just help with some of their folks, because a lot of people who are coming up in the world of social media didn't know the other side of some of the 40 and above and what we're more comfortable seeing and engaging with. And then I'm also young enough to be able to have been a part of the generation that grew up with social media as well, so I can fit both sides.
Along those lines, Corey, do you think that companies should invest in an internal, somebody that works with them internally to be their social media person rather than, or maybe in addition to, hiring an agency? Because there seems to be, you can get more of that authenticity if you have a voice within the company. Do you think that's true?
I definitely think that's true. If you can, in a perfect world, you have an internal person, but it's not always a perfect world. And in those cases, you hire people to be your heavy lifters.
CoreyPerlman.com and ImpactSocialMedia.com. He is the social media keynote speaker, the owner of Impact Social Media, Corey Perlman. Corey, always appreciate the visit, enlightening us more about the social media world.